Here's my top 5 plants that I'm growing in May and that you can too. Number 1 is the tomato plant. What I like about the tomato plant is there's so many different varieties, indeterminates, determinates. You can have Roma tomatoes for pastas. You can have beefsteak tomatoes for your slicers, for your sandwiches and everything like that. There's the cherry tomatoes where you can have in salads, or if you want just a little bit of a treat when you're out in the garden. And there's different times for how long they will grow, whether it's 55 days, maybe up to 80 days. You kind of want to look at when you're either if you're planting seeds or if you get plants from the nursery of how long they will take. If you're doing from seeds, you want to make sure that you add the time of how long it germinates, and it might take a little bit longer just because it has to go from seed into the babies and you have to transplant them. And so you kind of want to take aware of that. But tomatoes is just a staple here in the household because of the variety. And if I want something fast, I'll get something like an early grow that might be 55, 60 days. So in May, maybe in July, I'll have tomatoes in the beginning. I have planted them a lot earlier, February, March, and even April. So it kind of just depends where you're located and when the last frost was and how much heat you're getting. It's a little cool this time of the year. It still feels like it. It hasn't really gotten up to the heat that I thought it would. But yes, so what I like about tomatoes is if you want like an indeterminate tomato, they'll grow, just continue to grow until they die. And so you can have tomatoes grow up to September, October, or even November, depending on where you're located at in the United States or the world. And sometimes something like maybe a cherry tomato, it'll just grow constantly. I never feel like it just stops. But if you want something like a pasta sauce, and you get like a Roma or a San Marzano, and they'll all just like harvest all at the same time. So you want to take aware of that. If you plant like 6 Romas, you might get all the harvest all at one time. So you have to decide if you want indeterminate, where you have tomatoes throughout the season, or if you want something like a batch cooking, like a sauce, or freezing tomatoes maybe for the winter, then you'll go to something like a Roma, which is more compact. And one thing about the indeterminates is you'll have to be able to stake them up because they'll just continuously grow. And you can always just trim the leaves and, the lower leaves so that way it doesn't block as much airflow or anything like that. Unlike like a Roma, I'll just sort of put in the ground and I'll let it grow. Maybe I'll pinch off the suckers, maybe I won't, but they're just so compact and they just harvest all at the same time. I just tend to not worry about them as much. And if you want to try something a little bit different, you can go for like a pink tomato or like a Russian black prince tomato, where it will just be a different color, whether you want like a black purplish, a pink, or anything like that. That might just taste a little bit different. And the last thing I will say about tomatoes is we will do fried green tomatoes here at the household. So like something like an indeterminate beefsteak, if I feel like maybe they're not harvesting, but I can cook them different ways. I can pull them off when they're green and then just fry them up like that, and they'll taste absolutely delicious. So I don't always eat my tomatoes when they're about ripe. Sometimes I'll just cook them up when they're green and I'll just fry them. And so there's different ways you can do that. You don't have to wait till they're fully red. You can just take where they're just mostly red and maybe like a pinkish or red or whatever like that, just a little bit of highlight. And you can pull them there because usually they don't need to be fully ripe for the flavor to be there. The second plant that I can still plant in May is the beans. I'll do different varieties of beans, whether it's yellow wax beans. These are actually green beans right here. I like to have a different variety. We do make like a 4-bean salad here or a 3-bean salad, kind of depends on what we have. And so I like to have like different colors of beans because sometimes, with the eyes, if you see different colors, it makes it more pleasing to you. But what I like about the beans is I do have like a Blue Lake bush style where it'll just grow in one little bush and it won't take up a lot of room. You don't have to stretch it up on a arbor or a lattice or anything like that. It'll just be right here. It'll get a lot bigger, but it will require a little bit less work, so you don't have to worry about what I do over here on my string beans. Is it will grow up this little lattice, and there are beans from last year that it just sometimes I just don't have the energy to pull them down. I will. One thing about beans is when they're done harvesting, I'll let some of them dry up so that way I can just reuse the seeds for next year. But it does require a lot more cleanup, in my opinion. And but either way, if you do like the arch, because they will look beautiful when they're growing up 6-7 feet high, maybe over an arch, up a cattle panel or anything like that. But you have to kind of decide what kind of room do you have and what kind of beans do you want to grow. Do you want to grow fresh beans, or do you want to grow beans that you want to dry? And just what kind of taste do you have? The green beans has always been a staple. I've always known I love them. My family loves them. So I'll always grow a lot of beans. And they create their own nitrogen in the air. So it requires a little bit less work, in my opinion, just to be able to grow them. The third plant that I like to grow in May, and I've grown them before, but I love to be able to just continuously grow them because I do like them, is the cucumber. The cucumber is very good because it's just, a lot of them, they do have bush style and they do have ones that just trail up. I do have this metal trellis that I created a long time ago that I do just trail up veggies all the time. But it do require a lot of cleaning, as you can see. I just, sometimes I just sort of leave them up. I need to be a little bit better than that, but they'll trellis up no matter if there's stuff on there or not. And there's different options when you have the cucumbers. You can have the slicers that you put in salads or sandwiches, or you do what I have over here. And these are actually a bush style. I kind of didn't realize that when I started growing it, but they'll work. I like the bush and the cleaning because depending on what kind of space, I'll usually run out a lot of space. But these are pickling cucumbers where I will grow 4, 5, 6 plants. And when they're ready to harvest, I try to harvest them as close as possible and as small as possible. So that way I can just pickle them for the season. And they're very delicious. And it's something that you can grow cucumbers to eat right then. Or you can get something like a pickling cucumber and be able to just pickle them. And they'll last, 3-4 months, just depending on how many you want to make and everything like that. But they are a very good plant. Fourth plant I like to be able to grow in May and even before or after is the squash. There's so many different kind of squashes. There's the summer squash, the winter squash. The winter squash you can actually save up to, whether it's November, December. It's like a spaghetti squash or a butternut squash. That the only reason why they call them winter squashes is because basically they can be eaten during the winter. Now, the summer squashes you want to be able to eat right then as you pick. But there's so many different varieties and so many different ways you can be able to cook them. This is one of the squashes that you usually see in the store, green squash. And it's basically just a staple in this household because it grows so many. This one was actually planted in seed form probably about a couple months ago. But as you can see, it does very well. And every year I like to try, different plants throughout the season and see how many I can grow from seed. And the squash is just one of the plants that seems no matter what you do, it will grow. Eventually you'll have so many squash, you'll be chucking them at your neighbors. And I just sort of try to give them away. I do love them. I do eat a lot of them. And I'm happy that my family loves to eat them because they will just nonstop grow. And I'll grow like 10 squashes, maybe 20 squashes, just because once you get into that garden fever, you're just growing everything and as many as you can. But yes, this green squash is really great. I also love like the crooked neck squash. It's a yellow squash. You can get the heirloom version, and you want to be able to harvest them when they're, maybe 5-6 inches. You'll see once they get really big, they'll get really seedy, and you won't like the taste as much. Although when they do get big and I forget about them, I'll just shred them up and put them in like a bread mix and be able to make zucchini bread, which is really delicious. So at least with squash, if I forget to pick a few, I can find different ways to be able to cook them with. For my number 5, most people don't usually grow this. They kind of figure that they need a lot of room to grow, just because you may see in the Midwest that they're just growing fields and fields of them. But I started to grow more and more corn every year. You can get a 4x4 little plot, and you can plant them as close as you can, maybe a few inches apart, in my opinion, just because they do wind pollinate. So you want them close together so that they'll be able to pollinate each other. But on the flip side, you do eat the seed. So if you do have different flavors, they could cross pollinate. But usually I'll just do a sweet corn. Maybe I might get a different variety of sweet corn later on, and they will pollinate at the different times. So the big ones here, when they start pollinating, they won't be ready. So I'll get corn from the left ones over here, but these will still grow. And so the chances of them cross-pollinating won't be as likely. I mean, it's always so possible in the garden. You never know what's going to happen. But I do like corn. And when I plant corn, maybe now in May, these were planted about a month ago, but if you plant them now, around July, when you're just celebrating the middle of the summer, you'll be able to have nice fresh corn on here. It may not be as cost effective, but I like to be able to just grab a few corns on here and be able to just cook them up on the barbecue or on the stove. And they do require a lot of nitrogen because they can grow pretty high. I've had some grow 6-7 feet high. So, and what's great about the corn bed is when they get a little bit high, I'll plant beans in here and they'll be able to grow up the stalks. And then later on, you can plant the squashes below for ground cover, which is basically what most people know, the 3 sisters. And what's great about that is you can plant multiple ones in here. So maybe you won't get a lot of corn. I'm planting like maybe 50 corn plants, and hopefully I'll get 50, maybe more. But you can grow beans with them, you can grow squash with them, and all together, the harvest that you get in this small little plot will be well worth planting in a spot like this. So just to go over the varieties that I love to grow in May again, I do grow the tomato plants, and you can decide whether you want to start from seed or go to your nursery and buy a plant. Starting from seed will add another week or so to the harvest. The beefsteak tomato is like 80 days, but you can get tomatoes that will be 55 to 65 days, just depending on the variety. And you have to think of, do I want a determinate or indeterminate? The determinates will all just come all at once. That's what I will do with the Roma tomatoes, because I want to make sauces and you want a lot of tomatoes all at once, so you can just batch cook them. But my indeterminates, I like to be able to grow throughout the season. And up here in Northern California, I can get them last to October, maybe November. Kind of depends on the weather. Every year is a little bit different. But and there's so many different varieties to them. There's the slicers that you can put for your sandwiches, like the Roma tomatoes that are great for sauces, and I'll even put those in salads and different things like that. I'll make BLTs with Roma tomato if I want something more meaty. And of course, like the cherry tomatoes, where I like to be able to have little snacks throughout the garden, just because I feel like I always kind of want to eat when I see everything growing. It's just also delicious. And my next thing is the cucumber, which this is the straight 8, but you can pick almost any cucumber. I've never had a cucumber I didn't like. I would like to try the English cucumbers or the Armenian ones maybe next year. But the cucumbers are just a good variety plant to grow. They will grow very well in the sun with a lot of heat, a lot of water. The one thing I will say is you want to pick them when they're ready. If you wait too long, the plant will think it's done for the season and it will just completely die. I've had plants that I just forget because there's a cucumber hitting up there in the trellis and I don't see it, and there's a few of them around there, and all of a sudden the plant will be like, okay, I'm done for the season, and it'll just die. So I like to be able to just keep an eye on them every time. Maybe if you got them on a trellis, kind of just move the leaves around and just make sure that you're getting all the cucumbers. And if you got too many, because sometimes I'll plant like 5, 6, 7 plants, I'll give them my neighbors or friends and family. I'll do that with all my veggies. If I have too many, sometimes I get just overzealous with growing because I just want to grow everything. There's always people that will want them. And so it's a good thing to just, kind of grow what you want, grow what you like. Also with the cucumbers, you can grow the pickling cucumbers, which is a great way to be able to pickle the cucumbers and have them throughout the season until the next harvest season. I'll grow as many batches as I can. That way it'll just last all year round if I have enough pickling cucumbers. And I've recently learned the last few years how to pickle, so it's a really good option to make your harvest extend all year round instead of just like a few months in the summer. And that also goes with beans. I do like to freeze beans, or I'll can beans, and of course just eat them outright. And sometimes with the beans, I will just leave some of the beans onto the plant, and when the plant dies, I'll have the hard beans that I can just replant next year if I want to. So I love to just be able to save a little money, save a little time, and I'll just put these in a jar and they'll be good to go for next year when I plant. And it's just every year, I just save a few beans. That way I don't have to worry about buying seed packets. I could just reuse the beans from last year. And what's good about beans is you have the trellis beans, which I do love, but sometimes, they'll just keep growing and growing and growing. And sometimes you'll miss the beans because there's just so much leaves around. So I always have to keep checking on them. And there's also the bush bean I like. I usually do the Kentucky Wonder, or there's the Blue Lake, but what's great about the bush beans is it's just a plant, probably about that big, and you'll be able to just kind of like see it right there. There won't be a bean there, a bean there, a bean everywhere. It'll just be all right there on the plant, which is really nice because I like to be able to see what the beans are. But either way, what's good about trellis is it does go when it goes vertically, it just, to the eye, it looks really nice when you get like a nice trellis and your beans are just growing up and you have all the beans growing out. So it does look nice. And either way, it's really nice. Next one I absolutely love now. My family really loves it, so I started eating a little bit more of it. And I'm like, okay, as a kid, I didn't eat that much squash, even though all my family did. But growing up, you sort of just try the different varieties and see what you like. And two big things in my family is the early crookneck squash, which is really good. It's kind of like for me, it's more of a creamier taste to it. And we'll also do the black beauty zucchini. And what I like about this one is if it ever gets too big, sometimes you forget. You get tired. You don't want to go out there and check it all the time. If it gets really big, what we'll do is we'll shred up the zucchini and make a zucchini bread out of it, and which is really nice. And we'll freeze bread throughout the winter, so we can have the zucchini bread anytime we want. But another good thing about zucchini is it just continues to grow. You'll have so many zucchinis that will come out of your ears. You'll end up chucking them at neighbors, even if they like it sometimes. So like, oh, just try it. You'll love it. And a lot of them do love it. And who doesn't like free food? I know I do. But another good thing is you got the winter squashes, which my family loves. I still kind of want to warm up to it, but there's like the butternut squash, which I know my mom loves to make butternut squash soup. There's a spaghetti squash, which people make pasta out of if you don't want to use wheat, which is really nice. So, there's different varieties, and they're basically winter squashes because they last into the winter. They got a large hard shell on them, so they'll be able to last. The summer squashes, you want to eat them during the summer, basically right when they're harvestable. Or you can can them or freeze them, and that's one great thing about veggies. You can always can or freeze them, and which I really love because sometimes there's just too many, and I want to be able to save some for later because it's like, what am I going to do in December? What am I going to do in January? Well, I can my veggies or I freeze some and I'll be able to cook them later. I want to be able to extend the harvest as long as I can, and so that way I have food all year round. And the last one is the corn. I know a lot of people don't grow as much corn because they feel like they need a large plot to grow corn. And yeah, I mean, it just kind of depends on how many corn you want. But I have a small family, it's a couple of us. And if I get a 4x4 plot and I plant the corn close so that the way the wind pollinating, they can just pollinate right next to each other, because you don't want the corn to be spread out because it won't pollinate as easy. And if they're right next to each other, one can pollinate the other. And that's why you also want the same variety or close to it, because you're eating the seed. And they can crossbreed if they're too close next to each other. But another simple solution for that is you grow maybe like a sweet corn for a few weeks, and then later on, if you want to try a different one, you can. Because as long as they're a few weeks apart, they won't pollinate, because they'll be done with their pollination, and they won't pollinate the newer stuff. So you just have to have a gap in between. And that's what I've done. I do mostly sweet corn, but there are a few different varieties of sweet corn. And so that way I want to be able to, eat what I want to eat. And because like a tomato or a squash, it could cross pollinate or crossbreed, but it'll be next year because you're eating the fruit of it. But the corn, you're eating the seed of it. So, and a few of my honorable mentions. One, I have to say this because I have cats and they love catnip. And I will plant it around my property too, because there are cats that are, unfortunately don't have homes, and they're running around the neighborhoods. And I like to be able to, if they're in my property, in my view, if there's an animal on my property and it's not threatening anything, and I let them live and let them enjoy it. And if you do have veggies and stuff like that, it could bring in pests like rats and stuff like that. And if you have cats, maybe they're in the neighborhood and they smell this, they want to come by and scare those rodents away. It's twofold. They get something that they like, and you get them scaring away, potential pests. And I like to be able to, if I had a rabbit coming in my yard, I would be okay, just because it's like, that's why I try to grow a little bit more, because if something like that happens, the bugs, on the other hand, no, I don't want them at my stuff. But it's I know there's a lot of animals out there that are just looking for a meal. And I'm like, okay, I grow a little extra. If you want something, that's okay. And because I've also seen, when I grow my other honorable mention, the sunflower, I've seen squirrels just rip the head off of it and start eating at it. Now, my family doesn't like it, but I'll be honest with you, I kind of find it hilarious. And I'm like, it's like free entertainment. He's just gnawing at the stalk and just ripping the head off and just eating the seeds. But you can, if you don't like that, you can maybe have, there's different kind of like treat holders for squirrels, so that maybe they'll go away from your garden and eat the little nuts that you have and stuff like that. Because I do like the sunflowers. There's two things. One, they bring pollinators. And another thing is, I love sunflower seeds. And while I don't typically eat the ones with the shells, I do like them regular sunflowers. But and you can actually, I've seen people cook the whole head of it and just eat it right then. But I usually will just pull out the seeds. It's a tedious task, but I like to do it, and bake them in the oven. But I've seen people just bake these. I've never tried it. I've always might want to try just baking the whole head in there and seeing what happens. But I've seen people try it, and it works really well. And you can't go wrong with the sunflowers, especially when they're like 6 foot tall. People see through the fence and they just see a big old sunflower. It's like a sun up there. But these are my favorite ones I like to start. Basically, I say is start what you love. If only a couple of these you like, start those. And you can, look for other things that might do okay in the heat, because you want to factor in how hot it's going to be. And some things can't take as much heat. So I always say is just, grow what you like. Maybe try something new. You might like it. You never know. And that's how I've grown to like certain veggies is I said, you know what? I'll try it. What's the harm of putting a plant in, I'll give it some water and a little bit of nutrients and let it grow. If I don't like it, I can grow it no more. But unless the family likes it, then I grow it for them. But so just keep on with my journey. I appreciate everybody, and please like and subscribe and share if you can. And I'll see you next time.